Welcome to The Business of Family, the podcast where we explore the stories, challenges, and opportunities of family businesses. I'm your host, Tammy Buss, and I'm a family business survivor and also a family business advisor. In this show, we will be talking with family business leaders and experts to bring you insights and inspiration so you too can survive your family business journey. Whether you're a founder, a successor, a professional, or just curious about family businesses, this podcast is for you. Today, my guest is Dean Tansman, the second generation Vice President of Operations at AWOW Wipes, a company his father started 34 years ago. Focused on developing more eco-friendly products and implementing even greener manufacturing processes, AWOW Wipes' sustainable wet wipe product lines have expanded exponentially since Dean joined the company in 2020. With a keen eye for initiatives that support the earth while building the company's growth and market presence, Tansman aims to continue creating industry solutions that balance consumer needs with responsible manufacturing and business practices. Dean and AWOW Wipes have helped or been featured in many organizations and publications, too many to mention on this podcast. Anyway, welcome, Dean.
Thank you so much for having me, Tammy.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here today. So, let's start at the beginning. Tell me about AWOW Wipes and what inspired your dad, Avi, to start it back in 1991.
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer depends on the day if you ask him yourself. But what I've come to the conclusion is that to be quite honest, it came out of necessity. He arrived here in this country in the mid '80s as a new immigrant, and he had to figure his way out in the world. He came pretty much without a dollar to his name and had to figure out pretty quickly how to finance and run a life and a family. And he was always a very creative person and a tremendous salesman, in my opinion. I mean, whether it's wet wipes or tomatoes, he could sell all of it. Doesn't matter. But he happened to find himself in wet wipes, and I think he really identified it as a canvas with which he could innovate, which is not the typical way people see our industry because it's more low tech, but he brings a very innovative mindset wherever he goes, and he definitely did that here.
Yeah, you think, well, it's always been there. So someone had to sort of develop it or come up with it and then manufacture and put it out on the shelves. I mean, now they're for everything. The wipes are for everything now. I used to think of wipes as more for baby wipes, but it's expanded.
Well, you're spot on, because in the early '90s, really the only wipes that did exist were baby wipes, and it was already a commodity at that point. Huggies and so on wasn't really anything to shake a stick at, and he found himself in the adult diaper industry pretty early on. He had an opportunity with a business partner way back when, and he decided to make the pivot. He said, hey, if adult diapers are a thing now, why aren't adult wipes a thing? And he actually spearheaded the first adult incontinence wipes in the US market. And he ended up providing a lot of contract manufacturing for those products as well as others over many, many years to a lot of companies here.
Yeah. So you officially joined in 2020. But I'm assuming the business has been part of your life a lot longer than that. So tell me a little bit about your relationship with the company over the years, and then how you entered into the business in 2020.
Wow, that's a great question. You're spot on that the business has always been present in my life as well as that of my siblings. We're very blessed in that regard. Not just that we had obviously an interesting industry sort of in the background. We also actively found ourselves in situations of opportunities to learn, really. I mean, my father would take us in the summers to manufacturing sites. I remember going to shipping ports like Rotterdam to really see how the logistics of our products were making their way to the United States. We would go on sales calls to customers, and even though we were probably too young at that point to really appreciate what was going on, I think we did absorb something by reverse osmosis. So we definitely benefited from that. But I ended up in the business in 2020 because I decided to make a pivot from a role in education development, which I had thought that was the direction of my life for a while. And the way things would have it, I actually took a hiatus from that and took a trip to Asia. And about 2 months into that trip, the pandemic, the infamous pandemic, broke out, and I found myself um, without an apartment. So I ended up back in my hometown, and pretty quickly I realized that this thing wasn't going away, and I was like, you know what? There's an opportunity to work here, and I've always wanted to learn from my father, so I sort of, tucked my hat into my in between my arm, and I came to him and asked him for a job, which he graciously allowed. He didn't actually have a role for me planned. He's like, you know what, you want to come in, you got to make a place for yourself, show me that you can provide value. So I came in with quite a challenge, but it was very rewarding. Yeah, I have to admit.
Now, are your siblings involved in the business?
Actually, yes. So I have a younger brother in our manufacturing site in Israel who is involved in production, procurement, quality control, really learning the manufacturing itself on the ground, hands-on, industrially, on a very, very professional level. And he and I communicate a lot, and we really try to innovate together between the marketing side, the opportunity side, what we are able to identify in emerging niches, as well as trying to fit that with our manufacturing abilities and what we could potentially integrate into our processes. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. But
Now,
my other siblings were at some point as well.
okay, how many siblings do you have in total?
Um, we are we are four of us.
Hmm.
My older brother has a PhD in um, actually agricultural science, but
Okay.
maybe one day we'll bring him in. He's a phenomenally talented person, as well as my sister, who was involved about 10 years ago in some of the early moments of some of our brands, but really did a lot and left her stamp here as well. So we all love this company.
So growing up, was there a, you know, talk around coming into the business or going to forge your own path? Like, how was that growing up in the family business?
Tammy, ask phenomenal questions. This is a I think that I, as a young man, wanted to prove that I could do things from scratch like my father did. And while I do believe that if necessity um, required it, if the circumstances of life required it, I do believe that people find a way, and I would have found a way. But it was later in life that I actually identified the power and the potential of this vehicle that he had already built and maintained.
Mhm.
And none of my family members were, other than him, were actively involved at the time. And I looked at it and went, you know what? Let's go and do something with this. Let's, get out of our established mindset, out of our established business model, innovate, create new markets, create new products, new brands. And he's been phenomenally supportive of those efforts. And I think that it's paying off.
So you work with your dad here in North America, right, on a regular basis. So how did you, you're now the, the vice president. So obviously you found your niche and managed to prove yourself to move up in the company. So um, how did you and your dad decide to or manage to work together cohesively and divide responsibilities and that type of thing?
It wasn't simple for either of us. There's a degree of really putting your ego on the side because, with every relationship, no matter how great your relationship with your parents, there's
Mhm.
always some degree of baggage. That's just the nature of things. Um, and certainly I admire him for having the guts to bring a son into the business in a very active, close role because my sister had worked previously from abroad. So
Mhm.
they weren't interacting on a day-to-day basis like we do. We literally share walls here in our office. But what I found is that it has really put our relationship into overdrive and forced us, or how would I say, encouraged us to evolve our relationship and to develop our relationship in a way that I don't think would have been possible had we not been cooperating professionally. So
Right.
I look at it as like one of the biggest blessings also familially, like relationship wise. It's pretty spectacular.
So how is it then with four kids? That and two in the business, and your dad in the business, and I'm sure your mom is involved in some capacity.
Absolutely.
How do you sort of separate family and business conversations when you're all together? Because that's a lot of family in the business and a couple not. Does it revolve around a lot of the business talk when you're together at holidays and special occasions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we have a lot more to talk about than just business. We really love history and philosophy, and my siblings are phenomenally interesting and intelligent people, as well as both my parents, extended family. Really, we have some pretty spectacular discussions. But I think that business in itself, in a non-boardroom, non-corporate sense, tends to find its way into discussions because it's a living, breathing part of our lives.
Hmm.
um, which is really great that we have that, so deeply integrated into our lives that it just comes up naturally. And whether we're talking about, geopolitics, because we have obviously, manufacturing sites in Israel, abroad, we deal with, supply chains and things that are going on. We're dealing with tariffs at the moment. I mean, you name it, we have all these different touch points, so it comes up organically all the time.
One of the questions I have to ask you is you're coming in, starting in 2020, it's now 2025. You come in at a basic level into the business, and you're now a vice president. Has that had any influence with the employees? Like, have you been able to, manage that relationship and maintain those relationships with the employees now that you come in as a child and now you're their boss?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. It wasn't that simple in the beginning because, especially with some of the more seasoned employees here, people who've been here, close to 10 years, and there were even people here far beyond that at that time. Um, some of them, were totally receptive, and some of them weren't super comfortable. But I believe that over time we were able to collaborate on enough and create enough of a shared track record, enough
Hmm.
successes and enough of a resume, a mutual resume together as a company, that I think we've all sort of settled into our niches, and we understand everybody's strengths and weaknesses, where we can, really supplement each other as well. So um, at this point in time, we've expanded our team by another 4 or 5 people since that. Those have been primarily my hires, and they've also integrated really well into the team because we just know how to hire people, or we get very
Hmm.
lucky. I don't know which is the case, but we really have some phenomenal people, and competence is not that common in the world. But we seem to have found a really good concentration of good people.
So how do you divide the responsibilities then with your dad? Because you're a vice president, I'm assuming he's the president. How do you determine who's responsible for what?
It kind of evolved over time. I was a little bit more siloed into the online brand space, as well as, the developing out our digital marketing, because it's kind of hard to sell wet wipes online, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
We had to really figure out what that meant, and how we can do that sustainably as a company. But the over time, I've seen that he's brought me into his contract manufacturing side much more and more and more and more, because inherently there's an internalization of the manufacturing, and I think he likes finally having somebody to bounce off his ideas with. And it's not just him. For him, it was for years it was just him in the business, and he
Hmm.
had to sort of figure it out on his own. Obviously, my mother was involved, but on the product development side, it was really just him and
Right.
our production teams. Now we can actually tag team those things together, and it's two heads are really better than one.
So are you feeling that you're learning a lot from him? Because, as a founder, you tend to keep a lot in your head and it's hard to sort of to share that, particularly with, you know, you're his son, he's your father. It's hard to take that out of the mix. He's always looking at you as your son, but are you able to sort of get some of that information out of his head?
Yeah, totally. We've definitely learned to speak each other's languages. And I'm not a simple person. He's not a simple person. Nobody's simple, especially when we're talking about familial relationships. But as long as there's an openness and a desire to um, A, reconcile with ourselves, and B, evolve our relationships, which easier said than done, right? Um, we've really come to a point here 5, 6 years later where it's like, I never knew we could be so on the same page. So I hope that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It's complicated, right? It's very
Yeah.
complex when you have family and business. Now, what about succession planning? So you've got a brother who is involved in the manufacturing side in another country. You are the vice president of, I'm assuming, the entire organization. What does that look like succession planning wise?
I think we're still in a dynamic phase because my father, he is still an active part of the business, although his role has certainly evolved since we've taken on a lot of the day-to-day work that he used to have to do. He really can focus on the future and overall strategic planning, including on the production side, logistics, supply chain, you name it. He gets to really have a lot of fun now. Uh, Not that we don't have fun. We have a lot of fun on the day-to-day stuff too, but he really gets to think that big picture stuff. I guess it kind of depends on if, how my siblings might find their way into the business, but
Mm.
it is my sincerest hope that all four of us end up in this company because it's it's a beast of an operation and we punch well above our weight class, but there are a lot of moving parts and I think that, I just happen to be related to some really, really competent people, and I think each person would bring a lot of value. So, um, ask me that in a couple of years, and I'll probably have a more concrete answer
Well,
for you.
you know what? It's funny because succession planning is a journey. It's not a destination, right? And things change and evolve, but you always have to have a plan in place because what if your dad was out of the picture today and your mom? What does that look like with two siblings in the business and two not in the business? So that really comes down
Yeah.
to, do you really see it as a family business moving forward to the next generation? Is that something that you've talked about as a family, like keeping it a family business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for my parents who did put a lot on the line. Um, in terms of risk, in terms of you know, certainly in the beginning, financial instability because of a new enterprise and riding the waves of '08 crash and manufacturing basically moving all to China and them almost really having to reinvent themselves at a certain point.
Hmm.
We don't see that as something to be taken for granted, and I think that we all four of us have a desire to keep that thing going because we know what went into it. We saw it growing up. It wasn't something that was passed down to my father that had already been built. We saw him in real time struggle and schwitz, really, really sweat to get this thing built. And I think that we're all on the same page there.
Now, your brother, who's the PhD in agriculture, um, has he been in the business at all?
He has not in an official role sense, although he has consulted for us in many cases. He's a chemist also by education, and he's been involved in the development of some of our formulations. We run our
I
own
was going to
in-house
say,
labs. Yeah,
like,
for sure.
that's a great fit, right? That's sort of taking over and saying, hey, how can we make this either more eco-friendly, is that's one of your, projects, but also in agriculture, maybe there's, you know, many other uses for the wipes. Hey,
There,
because
there
is there a
yeah.
wipe for like plants,
First of
like
all, there are
to
wipes. There
clean?
are wipes for cleaning plants, and we've made those before for other companies, not under our brands, but there are definitely leaf cleaning wipes.
Yeah.
Don't ask me what goes into those because I haven't been involved in those projects specifically. Um, but I mean, there are touch points everywhere. We have a really successful line of industrial products, including very high grade isopropyl alcohol, lint-free cleaning wipes that we found that it was very, very appealing in the dairy industry actually for cleaning
Mm,
cows' udders.
yeah.
So we also learn as we go. We find where our products
Hmm.
are most appealing. And my brother and my sister have both been phenomenal resources in, just picking their brains and seeing where we could go and position new products.
Absolutely, because the founder generation is really, building a business, as you said, to pay the bills and just to, support the family. And then you tend to focus on your lane and try to build that. But the next generation has many opportunities to branch out and use the talents and the skill sets that they all have. Because when there's only one person or two, if it's your mom and dad, um, it's easier to take control, but once you start putting in four or the third generation, maybe that's eight or 10, it becomes more complex. And you really have to lean into each other's strengths. So I'm really thrilled to know that you're doing that already, even though they're not actively involved in the business day to day. I think that's super important to maintain a family business moving forward.
Yeah. And I'll add one quick thing to that, if you don't mind. Oftentimes it's the parents really are the glue to a family. Hopefully, if the dynamic is good, we find that there is an additional glue to the family, which is the business itself, and not in a financial sense, in a sense that it feels like a shared cause, something that we can all work towards together, which is really cool, and wouldn't really have it any other way.
No, that's amazing. So I do like to always end the podcast with 3 pieces of advice that you would give the next generation stepping into a family business. What's your 3 pieces of advice?
Okay, I think first and foremost, we have to learn how to laugh, especially at yourself, because relationships in general with people can oftentimes serve as a mirror, and we project a lot of our own I don't know if I'm crap onto other people. Okay. Especially our family members. And that can be very frustrating, because it's like turning the school of life up to like 50. So if we can go in with sort of just a willingness to laugh at ourselves and to laugh at the irony of situations and stuff, I think it makes taking the blow and so much easier, and it softens really the, when you get butt hurt and when you have that initial inclination to be offended, because that's just the nature of things. I think that's really crucial. But also just to laugh in general and share that. Another thing would be probably to be open to the transformation that can occur in a relationship, because oftentimes, we go into any situation in life, certainly with family and family enterprise, saying, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to change it. It's going to become, this thing. And over time, often, we realize that while maybe we were right to a certain extent, there's wisdom to having the other side of the coin, and that generation that has been there before, they got the business there to that point for a reason. And the essence of that reason, while it might need to evolve and slightly or somewhat change, there is a wisdom to it that needs to be identified. And I think that's also a dynamic process. The last, I guess,
Yep.
the last thing would be to really put the important things first, and not take any unnecessary risks, because while risk is crucial, it has to be calculated. And I certainly have seen successful family businesses fail in the second and third generation, because the recipients or the heirs of those businesses felt they had to outdo their previous generation, and they took steps that were totally not in line with what the business was capable of, or even the founder's vision, and that actually ended up really tanking things. So there is certainly a need of exercising restraint and wisdom within the business to really steward that onwards.
I love that. I love the vision, because one of the things I think generations miss is aligning the vision. What was the original vision? What is the vision now? What can be done based on, as you say, the capabilities of the company? So I love that. That's a really great point. Well, thank you so much, Dean, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And I got to say, do you go AWOW, or is it always a world of wipes? Because that's a bit of a tongue twister.
Oh, we go with AWOW. I mean, it's stylized for
AWOW.
us. Yeah, it's got that catchy ring to it,
Oh, wow. AWOW. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tammy. It was a pleasure to be on.
Take care. If you like this episode, subscribe to the Business of Family podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can also find Blue Roots on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. On the next show, I'll be back with another amazing guest who will inspire you with their family business insights. Until then, take care and keep it in the family. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, tax, investment, or insurance advice. Before acting on any advice, please contact your personal or company advisors.